If you have a modest amount of experience playing Shogun 2, you may have been vexed by firearm infantry. Elusive, as they take forever to research, and at first glance disappointing once you finally get the opportunity to wield them. Let's recap a few quick facts. Most Matchlock units have a range of 100, which is substantially lower than the 150 that most archers have. Matchlocks require a direct line of fire in order to deal damage, and their projectiles completely ignore armor. Whether it's cheap Yari Ashigaru, thinly armored warrior monks, or the lumbering Naginata samurai, if they get shot, they're dead. Being under small arms fire also carries its own morale debuff. These qualities make guns extremely effective against whatever target enters their sights. Low morale Yari Ashigaru will rout in short order, while elite units will be mortally let down by their small unit sizes. Another quick note on fire by rank. I rarely ever bother using fire by rank as it has a very slow response time unless you give an attack order to your unit before the target is in range. You can get around the delay by issuing attack orders, but that adds another layer of micromanagement that you may not have the time for in the heat of battle. But that brings us to the big question people have, and what constitutes the major challenge faced when trying to use guns effectively: actually bringing the weapons to bear in the first place. Matchlocks are outranged by archers, who also don't require a direct sight on their target, and who can fire at a much faster rate. I'm here to dispel the misconception that guns are useless in this game, but I won't tell you to use them in a missile duel because that is indeed dumb. To make matters worse, enemy archers will often target what they consider to be the most valuable unit. So if you are bringing guns to support an Ashigaru army, those guns will be targeted. We need to devise a method to eliminate an archer threat. The simplest way is to bring your own archers to skirmish the AI. But if you're playing on Legendary, you'll be well acquainted with the buffs the AI receives to its reload rate and accuracy. Even in loose formation, your archers are going to take more damage in the exchange than you'd like. Maybe you don't really care and are willing to stomach those casualties, but if you're not, then you can reduce your losses by placing your army on a forested hill, assuming there are any on the given map. The most devastating and comical solution lies in fire rockets. If you're going for gunpowder mastery, then fire rockets don't require much extra investment to field. They far outrange any archer unit, and there's no more a satisfying way to exact vengeance on the bow samurai the AI loves to spam. Whichever option you go for, you need to end the battle as quickly as possible. The longer it drags on, the more volleys those archers are going to get off. Thankfully, Matchlocks are very good at accelerating the pace of battle, with the added morale shock of their gunfire. Combine their support with flanking attacks and charges by your katana samurai or nodachi, and most forces will rout in short order. But wait, what about line of sight though, you may ask? You might be getting frustrated that your guns can only get a few shots off before your melee infantry charge through them to meet the enemy in close combat. After which your guns, the units you waited so long for and sacrificed a bunch of other research options for, just sit back idly while the battle leaves them behind. Allow me to introduce you to the staggered line formation. Here I have a pretty average pike and shot setup, with Yari Ashigaru and Yari Wall making up the first line, with gaps in between them. You want these gaps to be wide enough to present as many targets as possible once the enemy units get pinned down by your first line. But make them too wide and infantry will have the chance to run right through to your gun line. Pay attention especially to the threat of enemy cavalry filing through. These units tend to be narrower than enemy infantry, while their charges are especially devastating to matchlock infantry. There is a significant potential weakness to this formation, and that is the low morale of Yari Ashigaru. On one end, they're expected to take heavy casualties, while on the other they will inevitably suffer a morale debuff from being under friendly fire. As far as the campaign is concerned, by the time you're fielding matchlocks, your Ashigaru will already have a decent amount of experience to offset this demoralization. and if supported by a general to stand and fight, they'll be even more resilient. But you can't count on having experienced Ashigaru or a general in your army. There are other failsafes though. If you have Koku flying out of your nose, then you can just replace the Ashigaru with Naginata Samurai. I don't recommend this, not just because of the cost, but also because Samurai take longer to train and replenish, and they will be taking plenty of losses in this role. You'll be happy to know there's another more cost-effective failsafe for shoring up your front line. Keeping Samurai units or experienced Ashigaru in reserve. If you see a point in the first line coming under strain, you can rush your reserves there, dealing good damage to the enemy with their charge while allowing your guns more time to fire. If you don't have any Samurai reserves and don't want to expend valuable units in a frontline role, then you'll have to race against the depleting numbers and morale of your Yari by sending your cavalry around to deliver a flanking blow, inciting a chain rout before your line crumbles. This is a risky bet. You need to clear the field of enemy cavalry first, which can cost you precious seconds in this race. If none of these options are available, then you'll just have to count on wearing the enemy down through a battle of attrition. Be sure to have guard mode enabled on your Matchlocks, that way they'll hold their formation better and keep firing even after engaged in a melee. I tend to be flexible in my approach to using Matchlocks in the field, mixing and matching the above tactics, keeping units in reserve, replacing some of my Yari with stronger units like Naginata to strengthen the front line, sending cavalry out in flanking maneuvers to expedite the route. It all comes down to campaign layer considerations. What buildings I have access to, what types of army compositions I'm facing, and how much I have to spend. When using Matchlocks in field battles, you may notice that their kill counts are typically very low, sometimes fewer than 50 for a given unit. Don't be misled into thinking they aren't a worthwhile addition to your army. Matchlocks first and foremost are morale breakers, not killers. Where they will do plenty of killing is siege defenses. It's as simple as placing your men on the walls and watching them shred anything that enters their sights. Well, of course, not that simple. Again, they'll only get a few volleys off before the attackers crest the parapets. Meaning, just like in field battles, we need to find ways to keep the guns firing. Yari Ashigaru step in again, this time taking positions at the foot of the castle walls. Even if the Ashigaru are routed, the time it takes for the enemy to cut through them can net your Matchlocks 100 or 200 kills, enough to rout several units and potentially leaving the ones still standing vulnerable to a chain rout, should you sally out with your melee infantry or cavalry. And once again, what are we gonna do about archer spam? By the time you're fielding Matchlocks, you'll have access to upgraded multi-tier forts. It can be as simple as just leaving the outer walls unmanned. Remember, bows won't be able to fire unless the entire unit crosses over the walls and forms up. You can either wait for them to climb through to the inner levels, or rush your guns up to a lower level once the enemy archers begin climbing. You could also just have your own archers man the walls and engage in a missile duel with the enemies. Bow samurai are pretty good at this thanks to their armor, but if you have an expendable bow Ashigaru garrison, they can work well in drawing fire from the enemy. But there's another even more effective way to deal with archers, one that doesn't require you to give up large amounts of ground or even bring your own archers to the fight. After about 3,000 hours of playing this game, I discovered a quirk in the AI where it will ignore the units manning the walls to target a unit standing behind the wall. Combine this with the AI's reluctance to switch targets, and you can slowly pull this target unit further into the fort, eventually luring the archers into range of your guns, who can now take their leisure in firing while not taking any return fire. You can even combine all three of these tactics, having your archers man the outer walls, pulling them back after a few exchanges, forcing the enemy to close in and begin scaling the walls, only to end up under withering gunfire. Add in some heavy hitters like Katana Samurai or Nodachi and most units will falter under this relentless pressure. None of this matters at all if you can't even field guns in the first place. Strategically, they may even look like the worst type of unit to someone new to the game. Is there any way to circumvent the 40 or 50 turns of research to field guns? Yes. The most straightforward is to accept non-bond trade whenever the event fires, which will give you a free unit of Matchlock Ashigaru and access to the non-bond trade port, from where you can import more of the weapons. This option bears a few limitations. You can only build one of the ports, though you can work around this by losing the province and building one elsewhere, and you still won't be able to field Matchlock Samurai or fire rockets. There's the obvious question of conversion, but that might be an advantage depending on your wishes. And in case you don't wish to convert, you can build a temple and station a monk in the province to counter the effect. Failing that, a few Matchlock Ashigaru and some supporting units should be enough to deal with the rebels. Finally, the Nanban trade event fires rather unpredictably, generally taking longer the farther to the east your clan is. In the worst cases, you might only get the event after 1560. For perspective's sake, if you started researching towards gunpowder mastery on turn 1, you'll have gained access to guns before the Europeans even offer you trade. But what if you're playing an Eastern faction and want access to guns earlier? If you're ambitious, you can launch an amphibious invasion of Kyushu, taking Bungo, a Christian province that begins with a Nanban trade port. You've now gained access to guns, and the Nanban trade event will fire much sooner than otherwise, with the added opportunity for conversion if your interest is such. You might find it weird that I have not made any mention until this point about the palisades that your gun units can deploy during field battles when you're playing as the defender. That's because they're honestly more useful for disrupting enemy formations as they approach you, forcing them to funnel themselves through gaps in the defenses than actually placing your guns behind. If you've gotten this far, then congratulations! You're now ready to use Matchlock units to devastating effect, and you're no longer being misled into thinking archers are better in every way, or that Matchlocks are useless in field battles.
And Oda Nobunaga is laying siege to the Koiki fortress at Nagashima. This is his third attempt to reduce the island citadel. Sighted in a way, nor does he anticipate survivors. The Oda have set fire